Today's victim is an HTC 10 mobile phone, and this is 2 years old now and it needs a battery change, so we're going to do the battery change. So firstly you need something that blows hot air. So I've got a hot air station that I bought off eBay for about £30, but you can use a hairdryer. It works okay, just don't get it too hot and take your time with it. Okay, so I've got a set of precision screwdrivers. I'm going to need Phillips and Torx, some very small ones. This is from Halfords. And I've got a screen sucker to get the screen off, a pair of tweezers, some pry bars, a couple of picks, guitar picks that I'm using, a pair of gloves. It's quite important to keep finger grease and not to touch the components or the circuit boards. And there's the new battery to go in. And of course I've got some daffodils here and a game of chess. So that's all you need to change the battery in an HTC 10. On modern phones there are rarely any screws to get into the phone, so what you need to do is take the screen off first, and this is glued on. So we need to heat up around the edges of the screen with some hot air, and all that does is loosen the glue so you can pull the screen off. So I'm going to set the temperature of my station not to 400 degrees centigrade, but to probably as low as it goes, 100 degrees. I'm going to put it on maximum airflow and use this. And this is about a 10mm air nozzle. I'm doing this on my kitchen table, so I've just stuck some paper down here just to keep it clean and so I can see all the bits. Gloves on. Now what I want to do is just heat gently around the edge like this. Always keep the hot air moving. This takes some time and patience. Don't try and get it off quickly because you will break the screen. Okay, now the important bit is at the camera end. The camera end needs a little bit more heat. There's much more glue there, and that's the end that we're going to start taking it off. So just start warming the rest of it, but focus a little bit more on the camera end and just down those top edges. So if you just get a guitar pick or something else and just try and get it down in between the frame and the top edge of the screen. Now if you've heated it enough, you can just start to flatten it out and stick the pick underneath like that. It's really gooey, there's lots of glue there, so you just move it along gently, then you'll feel it'll go stiff again. And then you're going to need some more heat. Now there isn't really anything right here that you can damage. It's really important not to start elsewhere because the screen will get damaged, or a ribbon cable or something else. Okay, but here you can go in up to the edge of the screen, nearly to the edge of the screen, keeping it fairly horizontal, and you won't cause any damage inside. Okay, so I'm just going to get a little bit more hot air out. You'll feel the the glue go stiff again. As soon as that happens, get some more hot air on it. That's better. I can feel it less sticky. Some of these are glued on better than others. In the past, some that are really glued on well. I've got a piece of old screen protector and just stuck it underneath after the pick, and if you just saw it backwards and forwards, you can cut through the glue until it gets to the screen. Okay, as soon as it gets near the line of the screen, you must stop Okay, don't keep sawing, otherwise you'll damage the screen. Okay, so we've cut through all that glue. It's time for the sucker. Okay, so put the sucker on. At the top of the screen. And all we're going to do is apply gentle pressure. Let's turn it around a little bit so you can see. Gentle pressure. Get the pick underneath and just lift slightly, and you can see it pulling away. Okay. So I'm going to get a little bit more heat around the edges just to soften up the glue around the edges, and we'll go from there. Always keep the gun moving. Don't put it, leave it in one place for too long. Now we're going to work down this side here. Now we've got the glue out of the top, we need to work down this side. The ribbon cable to attaches the screen to the motherboard is down here, and there are connections at the bottom here for the buttons. You have to be careful of those as well. But down here is not so bad, so we're going to start working down there. Okay, put a little bit of pressure on the sucker. You can just ease the screen film in. Now the most important thing is to get the edge underneath the screen. Okay, whatever you do, don't try and stick picks in here like this. Okay, we don't want to stick picks in there. If you stick picks in there, you'll start sticking the picks into the side of the LCD screen and it gets damaged. And if you stick picks in and start leaving the screen up, then it gets damaged. Okay, so put the film in, make a gap with the sucker. Some are stuck on really hard, and make sure that the film goes completely underneath the screen. Okay, you can feel it go underneath the screen like that. Okay, when it's underneath the screen, just work it through the glue down the side. Okay, and work it down all the way down the edge like that. When we get to the bottom here, move the sucker to the bottom, and we'll start working on the bottom end. Okay, so put some sideways pressure on the sucker and just keep working around. Now, when we get to here, there are two buttons for the back, for the task and the back. Just get my fingers out of the way. Here, the task button's here, home button, back button. So you've got to be really careful that they're not stuck to the back of the screen. If they're stuck to the back of the screen, you've got to be really careful getting them off. Okay, so if you do need to get them off and they're stuck, you need to go in the middle and move towards the outside edge of this one. If you go in from the edge and try and unstick it by moving inwards, normally you damage the LED and then the button no longer lights up, or you damage the ribbon cable. Okay, I don't know if you can see inside at this point, but let's have a look in there. Okay, you can see in there that mine aren't stuck to the screen, so that's okay. But if they are, work outwards this way. Now, you can see the phone is opening up now, all the glue's detached. One more important thing to note is if you just keep opening the phone up like this, okay, the ribbon cable that attaches the screen to the motherboard will become tight. Okay, so you can't open the screen and fold it over. You need to work the glue, you need to work the joint down this side, soften the glue, take this off before you open the screen up completely. Right, the next job is to take out the SIM card. Turn that around for you. Take out the SIM card, take out any SD cards. You can do that first if you want to. It's just that I haven't done. Right, so just to show you about the lights and the task and the back buttons here. The ribbon cable comes out of the board there, it folds over, and the LED is the little white bit on the end. So if you come round and the glue has stuck them to the screen and you try and work through the gap, the first thing you do is break the LED so the button doesn't light up anymore. Okay, so what you have to do is come from this side along here and cut through this way really carefully, and before you get to the LED and before you damage the pads, just open the screen a little bit, put a little bit of pressure and just ease them away. They're so easy to break, and they're actually very expensive to replace because they're part of the whole power charging board inside the phone. Okay, so be really careful taking the screen off at this end. It's always good to test the screen, make sure you haven't done any damage with the heat or bending it or anything like that. Make sure it works okay. Okay, so we're looking for touch sensitivity and obviously that the LCD is working fine. Everything is fine, there aren't any, isn't any damage to the LCD screen, and the touch sensitivity works perfectly. Make sure you switch the phone off again. Okay, so I'm going to switch the phone off, unplug the charger. Right, so carefully fold out the LCD again. Remember, lift the left side off before you hinge it over. Right. So the next move is to take the screws out that holds the main section of the phone into the back. It's a Phillips 00. If the procedure gets complicated and you're not sure about where the screws came from, I have a piece of paper stuck to my table and I draw circles around them, put the screws inside the circles and then write labels where the screws came from. The main part of the phone is held into the back case with some clips around the edges. There's a clip here and a clip here and a clip here and some clips around here, and they're actually quite difficult to get out. And the best place to start is just here in this hole. This is the boom sound speaker, and that's the best place. It's just plastic, there aren't any ribbon cables or anything to sever or damage, no components. So I'm just going to start lifting it up from under here. So here the pick's in the gap between the chassis and the backing. All I'm going to do is stick the pry bar in the gap just to keep it there, and then just gently start to lever it open and work along this side, this edge here. Okay, you want to work along this edge and work around the back here until it comes out. As you work around, as you heard there, that's just a clip unpopping. Okay, now here you've got the on button and the volume controls, so be really careful when you take the pick past here that you don't do that. Next clip's here, so I'm just going to work along and get this clip off. And there we go, that's the last clip done. Take it off from this edge. Okay, just pull the glue off, and there is the back with nothing in it except a speaker and a few pads and lenses. So we'll just put that to one side, and here is the rest of the insides of the phone. Okay, so I've just folded the screen back onto the front. It won't stick, and we're going to work now with it screened down. Before you do anything with the inside of the foam, before you disconnect ribbon cables, take screws out, play with screwdrivers, pry bars, anything like that, the first thing you need to do is disconnect the battery. Okay, so here, this screw and that screw to remove the battery connector. Phillips 00 again, seems to be absolutely fine, good fit. That's one. The screws are tiny, so keep track of them. Draw the circle around them and mark them as battery connector if you're not confident about putting it back together. Plastic pry bars, let's get one without a bent tip. Okay, now just really gently, we're going to use the flat end and pop it off. So I have a little pair of tweezers and I'm just going to take off the protective stuff. It's not the easiest of things to do, like everything on this phone, and sometimes once you've got it started. Okay, so you can see the black is also peeling off, which it needs to. Okay, you need to peel all the black off and peel it back like this. Alright, just so that you can see the ribbon connector there. We need to take that ribbon out, so we're going to take that off. So we've peeled back this sticky insulation layer here. This black piece also has to come off because it gives access to the ribbon connector. So I'm going to take that off now. There we go, just stick that somewhere safe. Again, there's some more insulation just on this little bit of ribbon connector here. There we go. So now it should look like this, and we need to take out this ribbon connector, and this ribbon connector. Okay, these are standard circuit board connectors, so what you need to do is just go underneath the edge like that and just lift it up. You can see it unclip underneath the edge of that, just lift it up, and then this one needs to be lifted up the whole length. That. There we go, it's all lifted up. So these cables, this one, and this one, now need very carefully prying out. Okay, so I've got a very tiny point here, and I'm just going to go under the cable like that and just pull it out. And this one at the other end, very carefully, and just pull it out. Okay, this one's a little bit more tricky. Again, just start at one end, very, very gentle. You don't want to put any strain on these cables that isn't necessary. And just very carefully pull it out. Right, now moving on to the other end of the phone, we have these connectors here. So this blue one here and this white one. Like that. Just to pop it off. And again, use the other end. Very gently underneath. The last thing that needs disconnecting before we open it is this black wire that's running around here. So again, just put your bar underneath and just take it off. There are 4 screws to remove. This one here, 1, this one here 2, this one here 3, and this one here 4. Now this one is part of the connection of the power board. So these screws come out, and then there's a connection to take off. These we just need to remove. This is a Torx T5, so you'll need that to get them off. So I'm going to take the connector off first. So the metal part here is just to hold the connector on. So we just need to fold that back slightly. And to pop the connector off, we're just going to stick the pry bar underneath and just lift it up. The screws at the other end. So you can remove the battery by taking much more of the phone to pieces. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the minimum necessary. And you can now see that this board here lifts up. Okay, it's attached to the camera at one end, and you've got to be really careful of the power socket at the other. Now, there are a few gotchas here because it only lifts up a certain amount, and if you lift it up too far, you break things. Okay, so if you lift it up too far, there's a ribbon connector here connected to the charging board, which often breaks, and then people find that their charging port doesn't work anymore. Okay, be careful of this connector here because it will just get bent back slightly as it lifts it up. And if you lift it up too much, the vibration unit, which is here, is connected by two little wires to the bottom of here. And if you lift it up too much, it tears the wires off the back of the board and the vibration stops working. Okay, so you've got to be really careful. You have to lift it up absolutely as minimal as possible. So the battery's here. We need to lift this edge up. We need to start releasing the glue because it's glued down to this chassis. So what I'm going to do is just use this flat pry bar here and just stick it in that gap. There's nothing in that gap that you can damage, and then I'm just going to wiggle it side to side to start to release the glue. Okay, there's also another point. Be really careful of the, if you want to save the battery, of the connector, but you can just put it under there as well. You can just move it around, release the glue, and just give it a little twist to lift the battery up. Once you've got it unstuck as much as you can, okay, just by gently prying underneath. Remember, don't lift the board too high. Lift the board too high, all sorts of things break. Right, now those unsticking noises are normal. That's just the battery coming off from underneath, and that's about as high as you can take the board. Okay, I'll show you. That's the gap. Don't take any further than that. Taking any further than that, things start to break. Once we're at this point, just grasp the battery from both edges like that. Just give it a little bit of a wiggle, and you need to pull the glue off at the back. Okay, a little bit of a wiggle like that. You'll hear some more cracking, some more noises, and slowly but surely, firm pressure, and battery will come out. So this is the new battery. This is a genuine HTC replacement. I always think the genuine ones are worth the money. They seem to last longer and have more milliamp hour ratings, despite what the Chinese seem to claim on some of their third-party batteries. So I always go for the genuine one. And we're going to put it just as it came out back in the gap. Now, some people glue them in, some people use glue strips. Normally when you take the battery out, it is so sticky in there that it's not necessary to put any extra glue. Just put the battery back in and it sticks as well as it'll ever need to, and then the screws hold it in place anyway. There's nowhere for it to go. Put the battery in under the board. You can always just ease the connectors out afterwards. Okay. Now it's important that the battery goes right to the back first. Okay, so keep it angled up until you see the battery emerge here and touch the chassis at the back. Okay, you can see it's level in the corners. Very gently, we don't want to disturb the ribbon cables. Right, now just push it to the back, all the way to the back, and let it stick down in place. Like that. Give the battery a little press down, to stick it into the glue. Make sure all the ribbon cables are on the outside, nothing got trapped inside. Okay, that's really important. The other thing is, as you lift the board up, the camera sometimes just comes out of place, so just make sure that the camera goes back in its place, like that. I'm going to put the 2 screws back in near the camera end. It's really helpful if you've got a magnetic screwdriver. It's almost impossible otherwise, because they're really quite small. So I'm just going to gently put one in here. Now I don't tighten them up straight away. It's like when you're doing anything, put all the screws in first, make sure everything's aligned, and then you can just tighten them gently after that. And that goes for pretty well anything that you need to put screws or bolts in. Okay, so just leave them very slightly loose. So the next thing to go for is putting this connector back, and this connector needs to go back in so that we can screw down the housing there. Now these are quite tricky just to get in place, and often it's more just by feel. You can feel that it's in the right place, and then we're just going to press it in. Okay, it's quite difficult with a tool. You can't feel that it is going exactly in its socket. So I've put that in. This blue connector can sometimes just come out of, there's a little shape that it goes around there in the chassis, and it can just come out of the groove. Make sure it's in the groove before you bolt it down, otherwise the wire gets caught between the board, and when you put the screw in, the screw goes through the wire. Okay, so make sure that that's in its groove, and you can put the screw in clearly. It's quite important. It's very easy when you're doing this to create more problems than you started with. In fact, it's incredibly easy to completely destroy the phones. So I'm just going to put those 2 screws in there. Again, not quite tighten them up. And I can just make sure that everything's aligned properly. If the board's slightly misaligned, some of the screws won't go in because you tighten the other ones up and the other end of the board is misaligned. Looks absolutely fine. So those 4 screws there, I'm now going to tighten up. Now we're going to put these wires back on. So this white one here, this blue one here need putting back on their respective terminals. Okay, you can just hear a little tiny click as they go on in place, but make sure they're lined up first, because it is quite tricky to line them up. I think especially this blue one, it's quite tricky to get lined up. There we go. Click. Moving to the connectors at the back, we've got this black one, the main to the motherboard here, and the power button and volume button connectors to put back in. Okay, so I'm just going to start with the right one and work to the left. So just make sure they're fully into the to where they're going. You can just see a little bit of the copper wire sticking out, and that's normal. Okay, so make sure you're fully in, hold it in, and then press down the lever to secure it. So now I'm going to do this one. It's the volume and power connector. Can be fiddly just to get them in. Try not to touch the contacts or anything. use the tabs on the edges just to push it into place, like that, and then close the connector down. Okay, now the big one. Make sure the sticky is back, and I often find with this that it's pushing too far, so I just put the pry bar down so I can press it into place and just line it up with the connector, and then use the tabs at the edge just to ease it into place. Just one at each edge. Until it goes in as far as it's going to go, and then we can just flatten down the connector like that. Okay, so just make sure that's down all the way along, and it looks even. Check to see if they're angled at all, and they all look even and they're all down. That looks fine. So this black wire now needs to go back on, and then just clip it on like that. Now I'm just going to put all the pieces of protective tape back on the connectors. Okay, so I'll start with the one that covers here, so very carefully put it back in place. Just smooth it down slightly. And then this that we just folded back before can just go over the top like that. Just smooth it down. Like that. And the last piece of protective stuff goes on this one. And again, just smooth it down gently. There we go. So the last thing to do is the battery connector. We need to press it into place. Again, it's very difficult to do with an instrument. It's much easier to feel when it's in place and just do it with your fingernail. Otherwise you start pushing on it when it's not quite lined up. And we're back to the Phillips 00 screws here. So I've changed my screwdriver bit. And again, I just leave them slack until both are in and lined up. Tricky hands. And when they're both in, just gently tighten them. Time to put it back in the back. Now this is just a reversal of the removal process. I'm going to put it in this end first, make sure it's clipped into those clips, and then just press it in around the edges. Very, very tight. So just gently work around the edges, pressing it into place. Okay, so the top's in, worked around this edge is in, and I'll just go around the bottom, make sure the bottom's in. So a couple of things before you put the screws in. Make sure that the power button is out, okay, because if it's pushed in it gets squashed and then it doesn't work properly. So make sure the buttons are out and that the chassis is pushed down properly and you can feel the clicks of all the buttons. Okay. Another thing to be careful of is don't move the phone around too much. It's still attached with the ribbon cable to the screen, and if you move it independently to the screen, it isn't long before something breaks inside the ribbon cable and the digitizer or the screen starts to fail. So be very careful of those two things. So I'm going to put the screws back in. Phillips 0 again, 00 I mean. The long screws go at either end on the black plastic and the short screws go in the middle. Okay, so last thing to do is put the SIM card and SD card, if you have one, back in. The SIM card in like that, and SD card in there like that. At this point it's important to just go around the edges and clean off any big blobs of glue which are going to prevent the screen sticking down properly. So I don't know if you can see, but there's quite a lot of big blobs of glue just around here. So just use a pry bar to just gently scrape it off. See, something that size would be no good for sticking the screen back down. Okay, so just go around the edge and remove the glue. So I've just got a pre-made glue template for an HTC 10, which I'm just applying now. You don't have to use this. You can use B7000, something like that. Some glue that is really strong, but you can get it off with a little bit of heat afterwards if you need to. So I'm just going to go around the edge here and apply this template to the phone. So just go around the edge and just press the glue down with a pry bar. Let's just line the screen up like that, and just gently press it down into place. Make sure it's in the middle, and then I'm just going to leave a weight on it so that it sticks well. And there we go, one HTC 10 battery replacement. Okay, thanks very much for watching.